Hello, it's Chris Hynes from Wealthi. I hope you're doing well. Today I just wanted to run through a quick breakdown talking about Hobart. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have seen articles out at the moment and a lot of reportings about the Hobart property market. Had an exceptionally strong year in terms of price growth for houses and also units. And it's something that we've got our eye on very closely this year, looking at opportunities within the city or within Tasmania itself, and looking at how we can capitalize on what we're seeing in Tasmania at the moment. So in today's video, we'll run through the growth that we experienced over the past 12 months, how it's really performed the past month or so, as well as we've entered 2022, and we're seeing the easing of restrictions for borders, for international migration into the country, into Australia as a whole. We'll discuss a number of the population statistics, talking about where projections are tracking at present, how it's grown as well over the past 10 or so years. We'll run through a few of the major infrastructure projects in the state that are underway at the moment, and there'll be a couple little bits and pieces in between all that, but hopefully it'll paint a nice picture around Hobart, the opportunity that it presents, and why we've got a very close eye on it at the moment. And I think before we dive too far into it, it's worth noting that we currently don't have any opportunities in Hobart at present. It's something that we're monitoring, obviously, and something that we in the future will be looking at potentially taking on some projects, but we do still see it as a fantastic opportunity. And if you want to have a chat to any of the team or myself about the market in Hobart itself, please feel free to reach out. We're more than happy to provide some of our knowledge and experience and give you a bit of an understanding as to some areas that you should be looking at in Tasmania. But we'll get stuck into it, and if you've got any questions, please feel free to reach out to anyone in the team and we can give you a hand. So to start off with, this is a breakdown from CoreLogic talking about the growth that each city or capital city in Australia has experienced over the past 12 months to the 31st of January 2022. So if we take a look at Hobart, which is down the bottom of my screen here, which I've now highlighted, Hobart last year, or over the past 12 months, year on year, has changed or seen an increase in dwelling values by 27.6%. So it saw some exceptional growth last year. And I had some contacts of mine reach out to me recently and ask the question as to why has Hobart seen such massive growth over the past 12 months. And I think a major part or a major component of why Hobart's experienced such massive growth is the fact that it's, you could say, a very appealing place from a lifestyle perspective. You've got the beautiful scenery, you've got fresh produce on your door, you've got an affordable price point to enter in comparison to your Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane property markets as well. So it ticks a lot of the boxes from a livability standpoint. And now the way in which we work as well, having the opportunity to have remote working, you don't need to be in the office every single day, and you can benefit from living on the coast in Hobart, surrounded by beautiful scenery. It's an affordable or more affordable place to live as well. And I think we're going to continue to see some very strong growth in Hobart over the next 12 months. I think a lot of people's thinking has now changed given everything that's gone on throughout COVID. And I know it's something that just seems to be continually brought up, the impacts of COVID, but it really has had a major part to play on the Hobart property market, and I think this year we're in for some very strong growth once again as well. So in terms of how it's performed over the past month as well, this month over January itself, we saw a 1.19% rise to property prices in Hobart as a whole. And now that's all dwellings, that's not just focusing on houses or units, that is for all dwellings. But as you can see, that ranks up with some of the strongest performers in the state. I'm sure many of you will be thinking Brisbane is of course up there. That experienced a 2.29% rise over January. Adelaide about 2.18. Brisbane, that's excluding the Gold Coast, and that was at 2.34%. So sitting just behind your Adelaide, your Brisbane, and your Canberra market, but it's still experiencing some very, very strong growth as a whole outside of those five major, you'd say, capital cities in Australia, and that for that reason we've got our eye very, very closely on it. Now, population-wise in Hobart, they've experienced some very steady and you could say consistent growth from a population standpoint over the past 15 so years, as you can see by the right-hand side of my screen here. So this is change in percent for each year, and you can see that that's really sat around that 1 to you say 0.75% to 1.5% over the past 10 or so years. We saw a lot more migration to Hobart. We started to see people moving there from a lifestyle perspective, and that, you know, more so from your mum and dads, you could say, that are nearing the retirement age and fancied moving to somewhere where they could enjoy the finer things in life as well. So it's a beautiful place to be located. It has all the amenity that the capital cities have as well. So you've got everything on your doorstep. You've got connectivity. You've got the airport. And I believe we're going to continue to see some very strong migration into Hobart. Now, there was some figures as well taken more recently. So as you can see here, the last collected data was 2020. This will be updated very shortly, I'm sure of that. But as you can see from this website here, if you look at the population growth over the past 2 years, or 3 years more so, you can see that it's really started to pick up. Now, COVID was, you could say, lingering at the end of 2019, but I don't think it would have had a major part to play on the migration into the state at that time. 2020, March 2020, April 2020 is when the pandemic really rolled around, and I'm sure many people were thinking, well, let's escape to somewhere that might be more immune to COVID at the time, and Hobart was somewhere that you could say was very untouched by the pandemic itself. So we saw a lot of people moving to Hobart as a whole, and then through 2021 the same thing as well. You have to remember, I guess, with Hobart, that it is quite a tightly packed, or not a tightly packed city. It's not the densest of locations, but in terms of available supply levels are extremely low in Hobart, and of course there's an abundance of demand for somewhere like Hobart at the moment, given its lifestyle appeal and the way in which we've changed our living. And we're going to continue to see, I believe, that migration now that we've got international borders reopening, the easing of restrictions into the country. I think we'll continue to see interstate migration down to Tasmania as a whole, and it's something that we'll be keeping our eye on very, very closely. Now, another factor that we are looking for when we're looking at these investment properties is keeping an eye on infrastructure projects, and how does that pipeline look? How is it tracking for the next 5, 10, 15 years? And what's the greater plan for Hobart? What's going to add more value to the city itself, or make it more of a, you could say, an international location that you're going to attract people from overseas, for example? Now, as you can see by this illustration behind me, 308 infrastructure projects with 44 projects equal or greater than 50 mil are planned for the next 10 to 20 years. So that's a significant amount of investment. We'll run through a few of these projects in a second, but these were announced in the 2020-2021 state budget, and there's going to be a significant amount of investment thrown into Tasmania as a whole over the next 10 to 20 years. A few of the notable projects, as you can see here, so key categories of public investment, stimulus investment, include 150 million for housing initiatives, including up to 1,000 social housing dwellings, which is equivalent in $100 million worth of value. Additional and brought forward funding to fast track 220 homes under the affordable housing strategy as well. That equates to $24 million. Expanded home share program, $9.3 million, and the home builder grant of $20,000 as well, which will have a total value of $20 million. You can see there's $42 million for essential services infrastructure projects, including regional and ambulance facilities fund, Burney Court, for child and family learning centres, Launceston Police Station, and things along those lines as well. You can see there's also 17 million funding to fund critical maintenance on public buildings and other publicly owned assets, 100 mil on community infrastructure projects as well, 55 mil on roads and irrigation infrastructure, 10.5 mil for education and skilled infrastructure as well. Now, there were a number of significant investments that are going to be made into different sectors within Tasmania as well. So as you can see from the document behind me, within the energy industry, pipeline contains over $2 billion worth of energy-related projects over the next decade as well. So that'll be spread across a variety of projects, but as a whole, there will be $2 billion invested into energy-related projects over the next 10 years. In terms of agriculture, water, sewage, irrigation, and stormwater, a further $1.7 billion will be invested within that industry. Airports, Tasmanian government committed $15 million to airports in 2020-2021 budget, with $10 million to be provided to Hobart International Airport to support the re-establishment of direct flights or direct international air services, and 5 mil to be provided to Launceston Airport as part of projects that will expand the airport's security screening and arrivals terminal. Over the next 10 years, Hobart International Airport has planned for landside and airside upgrades that will be in line with aeronautical demand. So we're going to see that they're catering for you could say the influx that is going to be expected into Australia over the next 5 years from an international migration standpoint. So there's been a backlog in a sense from people that live in Europe, the people who live in South America, Asia, wherever it may be, that have been wanting to get into Australia over the past 2-3 years, haven't been able to given the restrictions, and now we're going to see that influx of migration into the country as well. So it's great to see that there's substantial investment into the airports as well, which will further improve its connectivity. In terms of logistics, you've got ports, which are going to see a 10-year infrastructure plan as well. Rail, there'll be a significant investment in the Tasmanian Freight Rail, which will once again improve logistics around the state, around Tasmania as a whole. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But as you can see, there's a significant amount of investment within this plan. If you want to have a look at this pipeline, please feel free to let anyone within the team know, and we can send it across to you as well. But yeah, they're really focusing on all fields within Tasmania as a whole. There is also the City of Hobart website, and if you go onto that, you can have a look at the projects tab. Within the projects tab, you've got current projects, and have a look at some of the current projects. You can see they are really working on everything within the city at the moment to really improve the city as a whole, make it a more accessible place, make it a more appealing place or destination as well. And I think a lot of these projects are going to have a very positive effect on the city as a whole. So won't run through all of those now, but there is a significant amount of investment that's going to be improving retail components, improving the streets, activating the streets as well with retail, with offices, with that commercial retail component. So it's all going to have a very positive effect on the city as a whole. So I hope that's given you a nice little short breakdown on Tasmania. I won't drag on too much further, but it's definitely somewhere that we've got our eye on at the moment. We see a lot of opportunity in the city of Hobart, and if you have any questions, if you want to have a chat to anyone within the team about how we can help you approach the market in Hobart, please feel free to reach out to anyone in the team and we can have a chat about that. But hopefully you've got some value out of this, and I hope you have a fantastic week. I look forward to speaking to you all very soon.